What's up, YouTube? This is Japan Pimp, aka Zen Fisherman, coming at you live from the San Francisco Bay Area. Is that right, Kenzo?
Yeah!
Oh, man, son. Tone it down. This salmon setup here has absolutely killed it the last couple of weeks here. I'm talking big fish, 30-pounders. Have not lost a single one. I don't know why it works so well. I mean, I don't have any science behind it. I can just tell you what I can explain what I have here, everything I use, and then explain the technique and the reason why I think it works so well. Let's walk through the pieces. We have a 40-ounce sinker. Sinker size obviously depends on the situation. We have a slider on the main line. We have a stop. We have a barrel swivel. We have a snap. We have another barrel swivel inside of surgical tubing, a 13-inch piece of surgical tubing. The barrel swivel that's inside that surgical tubing looks just like this bad boy. Just like that. It's the big boy, like 350-pound capacity. We have a 13-inch piece of surgical tubing, another one of those barrel swivels, another snap. 20-pound fluorocarbon magic thread, and downrigger line, 200-pound downrigger line. That's the same material as spider wire or Braid, something like that. What I do is I set it up like this. Then I take 20-pound, about 5 or 6 feet of 20-pound fluorocarbon, run it out here, and then put a anchovy rig on the end. Usually a long shank hook with a twisted wire going through it, and we shove it through the tail of the anchovy, out its mouth, tie it up with a pin and a rubber band, and it trolls behind this surgical tubing and just kind of spins in the water. What's been happening, and the reason why I think we haven't lost any fish, and we've been busting 20, 30-pounders the last couple of weeks, is because I have seen a number of times we get the fish to the boat and the fish wants to run. This surgical tubing will extend to 4 or 5 times its length. You'll see the fish just take it, and it'll just go wow, and you'll see the surgical tubing just stretch way out there. And what that does is, this surgical tubing that I got at Ace Hardware is not so tough. It's not so tight, and so it's kind of soft. So the fish can take it, and it just keeps the tension on the hook in the fish's mouth. So, we're fishing barbless hooks, so the hook never falls out of the fish's mouth, and at the same time, it absorbs all the shock. And I don't lose the weight, so we're not dropping balls in the water. What I do here is this barrel swivel here, I cut off the fat end of the swivel. So you see how the swivel's kind of elongated on this end and kind of short and stubby on this end. I cut this ring off on this end. And then I insert the swivel into the surgical tubing without this ring. So I insert it into the surgical tubing like this way. Let's pretend I've already cut this end off, okay? And then we're going to take it, and let's pretend it's not in the surgical tubing yet. We'll just slide it in the surgical tubing all the way up until that ring is completely covered by the surgical tubing. Then I get that 200-pound downrigger line, just tie it there, tie it up nice and tight between the ring and that end of the barrel swivel and that little crevice. Tie it up, cinch it up nice and tight, wrap it up with some magic thread a bunch of times. Done. Same thing on the other end. That's the setup. And when fish take this, it's like having a real soft rod tip in the water. And we know that I usually fish with braid, and braid has no give at all. In the old days, we'd fish with mono, and if you let out, 30, 40 feet of mono, it's like a rubber band. It gets real stretchy. When you're fishing with braid, there's no give. You're relying on your rod tip 100%. And if you're going to fish with tie-on weights, so that you don't drop the weight when the fish bites. You just put it through a slider. You see that? So the slider just, the fish bites, and it just takes the line right through the slider. And then that way you're not losing weights, you're not wasting money on weights. And this surgical tubing takes up all the shock that the fish is doing with the head shaking. And today, in fact, we were out fishing in Bodega Bay and we busted about 3 or 4 fish near 30 pounds. I would say maybe even over a little 30, maybe even a little over 30 pounds. And when I saw the fish come to the boat with this surgical tubing, they would make a run for it, or a couple of times it actually got tangled in a couple fishermen's lines that were trolling. This didn't get tangled, but the rod tips tangled or something happened. And the fish is hanging in the back and it's swimming. And this surgical tubing is stretching 4 or 5 times longer than it is. And it's just absorbing all that energy from the fish. And it's keeping tension on that hook. So I don't need to worry about keeping my rod tip taut all the time. I don't need to worry about keeping my rod tip bent, keeping pressure on the fish, because this is doing that underwater for me. And I didn't lose a single fish today. They bit it. I had really sharp hooks, well tied. And this is the setup here that I would recommend if you don't want to lose weights. And this can handle the big boys. The reason this breaking strength on this surgical tubing is really high. And the reason why I can run a really light 20-pound fluoroliter behind this and catch really huge fish is because when they're pulling, that 20-pound fluoro is not taking all the energy of that fish. This thing is. You'll see it stretch. You'll see it underwater. They were trying to net the fish. They were trying to net this huge salmon that we had today on the boat. And while they were doing it, that salmon was jumping out the water and shaking its head. And you saw this thing stretching and stretching, and it dove back down, and then it ran away from the net. And you saw this thing just stretch underwater. And if not for this, I think we would have lost that fish and a few others. So this is the setup I recommend. They're really easy to tie. These barrel swivels slide in there pretty easy. They're snug, but it doesn't take too long. I could probably make about 10 of these in a half hour. That's what it is, guys. Listen, if you're serious about salmon fishing, give it a try. You won't be losing weights. You'll be getting a lot of fish. Just make sure you have a good reel that can handle reeling up a fish and a weight. And I think you'll be impressed. Or you might even want to just remove this. If you don't want to do this setup, take this off and then just put a dog whistle or a single release above here, and then you'll have the benefit, you'll still have the benefit of the elasticity of this surgical tubing to keep the fish in the hook in the fish's mouth. Hey, I hope you learned something today. This is something that's been working out really well. Give it a try. I'm sure it'll help your catch numbers go up.